All right, boys, this one's going to change the way you look at a lot of things with eating, with dieting. We always get the question, can you build muscle while actually losing fat or while being in a caloric deficit? Is it possible? And if it is possible, what's the best way to go about it? Well, there's actually been some research just within the last few years that's surfaced that's going to probably change the way a lot of people think. And a lot of trainers are still a decade behind. But when it comes to actually being able to build muscle, even in some fairly extreme caloric deficits, even with relatively low protein intake, this new information has the fitness industry, the diet industry on its head. Because obviously nobody wants to lose all of their muscle in an attempt to cut or get lean. You don't want to look like Will Ferrell with his shirt off after a cut. Listen to this video closely, the entire thing, because there's a few core points here, and understanding this changes a guy's potential ability to build muscle even when in a calorie deficit or even while fasting. So this study that was published by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It was a solid study, and basically they wanted to look at the relationship between hypertrophy, muscle building, and weight loss. So what they did for 90 days, they had everybody consume a super low calorie liquid diet of 800 calories per day. Obviously not ideal, not recommended. That's crazy low. They divided these guys into two groups. One group stayed sedentary, they were inactive, and the other group was put on some basic weight training program. And they took muscle biopsies at the beginning, the middle, and then again after they finished the 90 days. And they found both groups lost a lot of weight on average, which was no surprise. They lost about 35 pounds on average. So they lost a lot of weight. But really matters most was how much fat they lost on average and how much precious muscle to fat, the ratio, was lost between the different groups. Well, when they did the muscle biopsies, they did a cross-sectional area of type 1, type 2 style muscle, which is the slow twitch and the fast twitch muscle. And here's where things get a little interesting, because the group that resistance trained actually still built muscle, even on this super low calorie, liquid, low protein, crappy diet, just by working out. So what does this tell us? Well, in a nutshell, it tells us that resistance training, weight training, AKA having a stimulus, is the number one most important factor for building and sustaining our lean muscle mass. And if this group had a proper science-based hypertrophy plan like we have in the Modern Alpha Project, they probably would have had even more muscle gains. Now, of course, these weren't seasoned gym vets, they weren't bodybuilders, and it gets harder to sustain a high level of lean muscle if you're following a low calorie, crappy diet. They likely would have lost a lot more muscle because it takes more food, more nutrients to support more muscle mass. But the fact that this study proved people could be on an 800 calorie diet and not lose muscle if they were just simply resistance training is pretty unreal to see, because I think a lot of people put way too much emphasis and fear into thinking that if they go low calorie or they go on a fast for a couple of days a week, that they're going to lose all their gains. But let's address another big piece of the puzzle, another thing that's really important, and that's protein intake. So with protein, there's a different study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and it had subjects on a 40% caloric deficit, which is a very aggressive deficit. So they had one group consume 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. That's the low protein group. And that is about the ratio your average person eats in North America for protein. And the other group was the high protein group. They consumed 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, but their calories were identical. So they ate the same amount of calories exactly, just coming from different macros, different foods. This is the most important thing to point out. And the result, the high protein group actually still built muscle, even in a 40% calorie deficit. The high protein group had an increase of lean body mass of 1.2 kilograms, even in a deficit, which if you ask a lot of people, even personal trainers, they would tell you that is not possible, not feasible. The science is pretty clear. It is possible, albeit it's not ideal. So what about the low protein group? Well, they had no increase in muscle mass. But now the real kicker here, the high protein group also lost significantly more fat. And remember, they were eating the same exact amount of calories, just one group was eating more protein. And I know that you'll hear a lot of people say it's calories in, calories out, energy is all that matters, but that's simply just not the case. Calories are the last thing that I want my clients thinking about, obsessing over, because the literature is becoming more and more clear every passing year. you can have two groups of people eat the exact same amount of calories and see completely different results. Food choice matters, food timing matters, nutrients matter, which this study doesn't even factor in. And it's also pretty easy to conclude that if people just increase their protein intake and lift some weights, people build more muscle and burn more fat. And ideally, that protein should be an quality animal protein source if you want to get the most out of it. And if we do that, we don't really need to worry a whole lot about losing muscle, even if we're in a calorie deficit for a while, even if we're fasting a couple days a week. So can we build muscle while losing fat? Well, this study group was in a massive 40% deficit and they still built muscle. So without a doubt, yes, you can. So if you're looking to lose a pile of fat, yes, of course, you're going to want to be in a caloric deficit most days. Probably not all days, because that's just going to tank your metabolism. But more importantly, make sure you're keeping your protein intake higher than you would if you had excess calories. That's really the ticket, and that's really the key takeaway here. Keep protein, keep amino acids steady throughout your day. You don't need to eat 5, 6, 7 meals a day like the old school bodybuilding diets would have told you to do. You don't need to be snacking all day either. Snacking is a food corporation marketing tactic. Like we do in the stack diet, you can simply eat 3 times a day, but you can't just have one meal that's all carbs and one meal that's all protein. People get this mixed up all the time. People are eating these snacks that are 90% carbs, fat, with no significant amount of usable protein. And that's where you run into problems, because you need that protein steady throughout the day. And it doesn't matter what your eating intervals are. They can be 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours between meals. What matters is those meals all have enough protein in them. That's really what's critical. And if you want to find out how much protein you can eat at once, the old school ideas about that have also been busted. And I made a full video about that. Make sure you guys watch that. It's a game changer, and it's why the stack diet is designed the way that it is and why it's so much simpler and easier to follow than your traditional diet.